the respiratory system. So we'll be doing the introductory part. So starting with the definition of respiration. So it is the process by which oxygen is taken in and carbon dioxide is given out. So from this we can say that there are mainly two respiratory gases. First is oxygen and second is carbon dioxide. So in this process, mainly the oxygen is taken inside the body and the carbon dioxide is given out. Now the first breath takes place only after birth, as the fetal lungs are not functional. So during the intrauterine life, the exchange of gases between the fetal blood and the mother blood occurs through the placenta. So you should remember that the first breath takes only after birth. Now the normal respiratory rate, so in newborn it is 30 to 60 per minute, and in adult it is 12 to 16 respiratory rate per minute. Now mainly there are two types of respiration. External respiration and internal respiration. So in external respiration, it involves the exchange of respiratory gases between lungs and blood. So here mainly there will be exchange of respiratory gases, that is oxygen and carbon dioxide, between the lungs and the blood. Internal respiration means it involves the exchange of respiratory gas between the blood and the tissues. Simple. Then phases of respiration. So there are mainly two phases: inspiration and expiration. So in inspiration, the air enters the lung from the atmosphere. So the air, it will be entering the lung from the atmosphere, and it is an active process because it requires energy. Then expiration, it is the air. During this, the air leaves the lungs into the atmosphere, and it is a passive process because it does not require any energy. So starting with the respiratory tract. So the respiratory tract usually starts from the nose. So this is the nasal cavity, this is the pharynx, this is the oral cavity, then this is the pharynx, then this is the larynx, also known as the voice box. Then this is the green portion is the trachea, also known as the windpipe. Then this trachea divides into two bronchi. Alone, singular, it is known as bronchus, and together they are known as bronchi. Then this bronchi, each bronchi, it divides into bronchioles. Then this bronchioles further they are converted into the alveoli, divide into alveoli. There are two lungs. This is the right lung, this is the left lung, this is the notch for the heart. Then there is pleura. It has mainly two coverings. The inner lining, it is known as visceral lining, and the outer is known as the parietal. This is the diaphragm, and it is one of the muscles of the respiratory system. So starting with the nose, the pharynx and the larynx, they contribute the upper respiratory tract. The nose, pharynx and larynx. Then the trachea, the two bronchi, each is known as bronchus. Then the bronchi, it divides into bronchioles and alveoli. Then the two lungs, the pleura. Then the pleura has mainly two linings: inner visceral, outer parietal, and muscles for breathing, that is intercostal muscle and diaphragm. So all this constitute the lower respiratory tract. The trachea, the two bronchi, bronchioles and alveoli, two lungs, the pleura, and the muscles for breathing, that is intercostal muscle and the diaphragm. Now the trachea and the two bronchi, they together makes the tracheobronchial tree, as it resembles like a tree. So it is known as the tracheobronchial tree. Now the respiratory unit. So it is mainly the bronchioles and the alveoli. They constitute the respiratory unit. Also, it is the parenchyma of the lung. It is a terminal portion of the respiratory tract. So mainly the bronchioles and the alveoli, it is a place where there is exchange of gases, that is O2 and CO2 exchange happens. So here you can see the respiratory unit. So this is the respiratory bronchioles. Then now the small circles, they are the alveoli, and a group of alveoli, it is known as a alveolar sac. So see, this is the alveoli, small circles, and the bigger and a bunch of alveoli, it constitutes the alveolar sac. Okay, so this is the alveolar duct. So this whole thing, it constitutes the respiratory unit. Now the respiratory membrane, it is a membrane through which exchange of gases occurs between the alveoli and the blood. So it is mainly the membrane through which the exchange of gases, that is O2 and CO2, occurs between the alveoli and the blood. So starting with the functions of the respiratory tract. So first is olfaction. So the olfactory receptors, they are present in the mucous membrane of the nostrils, and they are responsible for the olfactory sensation, that is smell. Then vocalization. So mainly it is the speech apparatus. The larynx, it is also known as the voice box, so it helps in vocalization. So third point is prevention of dust particles. So dust particles which enters the nostril from the air, they are being prevented from reaching the lungs by filtration method, filtration action. Filtration action. Filtration action is of the hairs in nasal mucous membrane. Okay, so firstly the prevention will be from the filtration action, that is, this is given by the hairs in the nasal mucous membrane. Now the small particles which escape the hair, they are being held by the mucus. Then filtration action, then mucus, they will be held by the mucus which has been secreted by the nasal mucous membrane. Secreted by nasal mucous membrane. And if dust particle, it escapes both the nasal hair and the nasal mucous membrane, then they will be removed by the phagocytic action. Phagocytic action of macrophages which are present in the alveoli. And if they all escape all these methods, all these steps, then the particles, if it escapes all the protective mechanism of the nose and the alveoli, then they are being thrown out by the coughing reflex and the sneezing reflex. So fourth point is the defense mechanism. So the lung plays an important role in the immunological defense system of the body, since the mucous membrane of the alveoli, it mainly contains leukocyte, macrophages, mast cells, etc. in it. So it has its own defense mechanism. So the fifth point is maintenance of the water balance. So during expiration, the water, it evaporates through the expired air, and some amount of the body water is lost by this process. So by this process, there is maintenance of water balance. Then sixth point is regulation of body temperature. So again, during expiration, along with the water, some amount of heat is also lost from the body, and thus the respiratory tract plays an important role in the heat loss mechanism. So in this way, it regulates the body temperature. Seventh point is anticoagulant function. So as I told that the lungs, the inner lining of the alveoli, the mucous membrane, it mainly contains leukocytes, mast cells, and etc. So the mast cell, mainly the mast cells, they secrete, and as you know that heparin, it plays an important role in anticoagulation, and it prevents the intravascular clotting. So eighth point is synthesis of hormonal substances. So the lung tissues, they also synthesize the hormonal substances like prostaglandin, acetylcholine, and serotonin. So this is the function, that is synthesis of hormonal substances, mainly which, that is prostaglandin, then acetylcholine, serotonin. So last point is swallowing, that is deglutition reflex. So while swallowing the food, the respiration is arrested for a while. So while we are swallowing the food, the respiration is stopped for a while, very short time, very fractions of second. So temporary arrest of respiration is called apnea. So arresting of the breathing during swallowing is called swallowing apnea or deglutition apnea. That is swallowing apnea. It is the temporary arrest of breathing during swallowing. It is called swallowing apnea or deglutition apnea.